back to the drawing.
Like the different, yeah, like to me, it looks like it could, like, you know, my thoughts on these, it almost looks like somebody tried to draw that subdivision with an Etch-a-Sketch. And I still think that they should be a square or rectangle, and then we never have an issue over access to anybody, but.
What I can assure you is we're not using an Etch-a-Sketch.
It does, trying to draw a square with one.
But we do get the applicants to communicate what they want. So some of that follows fence lines that they've already put in place. Some of it, I should get a little bit more background, is based on the opportunity to have an open discharge. So that's why they're looking for that particular size of parcel. So if you imagine literally in the middle, you know, kind of into the tree line where you can see just south of the clearing of the house, that's where the open discharge point would have to be located to be able to meet all the required setbacks. So the applicant has also expressed an interest. They're really interested in the farmland. They're trying to kind of offload the existing buildings as a saleable element.
The north, like if you go south of that, like right where your purple line is at there to 20-4, like is that well, it looks like it's been baled, so it.
Yeah, it probably could be hay, and so yes, you can see the pattern of some size of equipment has been able to go into that area, maneuver around, and be able to come back out to the end.
From another approach onto 20-4, what, like that looks like to be a lot of farmable land right along the road, eh?
So who knows what it will be used for in the future, but I know this year, I think that photo must be a couple years old. This year, that is strictly being used as pasture.
The photo you are looking at is from 2021 from our GIS, so that's to another picture that shows what the lay of the land looks like along that section of 20-4. Just have to find my reference for Andrew to pull it up on the screen. It is the second photo, Andrew, on page 54, if we pop that up. And so you can see, you know, it's kind of a dip. Sorry, you can see a nice tan line right through the middle of that second photo. That is the actual road surface on 20-4. And we're standing from quite a distance. Here we're actually in on the property at a high point along the south boundary looking back. So bearing in mind that there's that distance to try and read how much of elevation changes. You can see what I mean by a big dip, big hill, and then more dips. So that's what that section of road looks like. And that's why the applicant has proposed sharing the access under an easement. And yes, actually that also goes to your question about the current use, because you can see it's a lot more pasture stubble there. I'm not sure, if, Andrew, if you could zoom in a little closer to be able to see what that crop material looked like. And there were cattle in the field at the time, but as opposed to our 2021 photo, which showed that the previous owner had attempted haying or cropping of some sort.
That approach is used as a shared approach currently, and has been for the last multiple years. So the previous owner was renting out the farmland, and as you come into the approach, if you take an immediate turn to the south and parallel the fence, there's a gate right there that enters the farmland from the acreage site. So it has functioned that way for a number of years.
So continuing on with the presentation, Mr. Chair. So there is no need for a road widening along 20-4. That's already been taken care of. There is, though, if we have structured condition number 3 to be a 2-part. The applicant, if they change their mind, can still try to see if they can get a safe location for a new access for the remainder parcel. Or they can provide that easement agreement that's satisfactory to the county showing how we would share. And that's an example where we'd be wanting to double check the text. So when we say it's satisfactory to the county, it's not just whatever you bring in. You may get some criticism on that. And as I mentioned, there's also need to do a little bit of grubbing or brushing. I think it's the direction is to the north on 20-4 to improve that sight line. The last thing I'd like to bring to your attention on this application is our calculation of the Rural Development Fund. This is something that the applicant did have questions about. And when we looked at this particular application, our initial thoughts were we were looking at a farmstead removal, but looking further at the role of the cabin or dwelling that's there, and the layout, this is hard for us to rationalize as a traditional farmstead. It doesn't, yes, it does have a Quonset that probably had an agricultural support. Yes, it does have a building that may have been used for seasonal dwelling, but it doesn't have any of the other traditional outbuildings or was the original homestead, so to speak. So in calculating the rural development fund, we thought it was more fair to treat this as a residence on a bare parcel. And that's why we said the first 5 acres was exempt from the rural development fund. And the remaining, just short of somewhere between 4.5 to short of 5 acres would be subject to the rural development fund contribution. Having said that, we still crunch numbers as if it was a farmstead, and it just, in this particular circumstance, it almost comes out as a draw. When you measure the driveway, the Quonset hut, the one fence paddock, and the area, even being generous, taking the yard around the house. So that's why we evaluated it for that determination. That's the end of my presentation, yes.
All right. Before we get to questions from the board, whether we realize it or not, this particular property has come up in a couple different topics. One recently around dust control from the campground to the north. So we had a high-level discussion about if this property is not developed or utilized, if we could scale back the dust control so it did not extend past this property. So just to give you guys a bit of context with this particular property, and that does seem to have some merit. If no one's living there, no one's benefiting, we might as well save the developer a little bit of money each year. And this was also requested for a water line connection previously. So that's the context behind where we've seen this property before. Go ahead, board member Gender.
Yes, I just find that the distance that they are off of the road, in order to put that burden onto, say, like that campsite for dust suppressant, I don't find that it should be up to the campground nor to put onto that. That they have the ability, if they wish to have it, that they can have the dust suppression brought at their own. But being, I'll just look at the distance that they are off the road. That it is not a necessity to, I'll say, fulfill someone else to build the supply the dust suppression.
Okay. It's good to note we're not making that decision at this time. And a lot of it will depend on, I believe, the next application as to what the plans are for this property, if they're building, if they're going to live there, that sort of thing. So it may be a moot point even further back from the distance from the road. Any other?
Just one point, and I agree with board member Clark on the way it's shaped there. I would have sooner seen a square. I get the easement and whatever else, but it could be worked out between the new owners or whatever to cross their land, even if it is a square, instead of having to put a new approach. It does work quite well with most people, but yeah, there are instances it doesn't. So I'm not saying I'm going to hold it up, but I do have concerns why it wasn't squared up.
I think we need to be careful what we wish for. When we require a rural development fund for each additional acre, then our developers and applicants are going to carve out the least amount of acres possible. And that may be one more reason why we're getting some of these oddball shapes. I get this carve out is mainly due to the shared access point, but if we want them to preserve farmland, we're going to get some oddball shapes. Go ahead, board member Gender.
The part that I'd have to caution her is, okay, the heights of the road versus the ditch and the corresponding land that, say, like if they have to come in onto the field, whether they come into a hill where it's into a low spot, the amount of grade that would have to be built there. From what I saw the pictures, I believe that it's very hilly in there, and that to build an approach would be an astronomical amount of money that would be spent for there versus, say, like carving out I do agree, like seen some of them where they are carved up, and I do believe more in the squares, but in this instance, if it doesn't pan out for financially, or if they can work together to have it, an agreement between the two landowners, by all means.
And we will be confirming so our process is to confirm that there's an easement agreement. Is there any sort of caveat that goes on title for future?
Yeah, so how that works, so in this particular case, the county doesn't necessarily have to be a signatory to the easement, but in other cases like this, what I've done is I've at least put in a line that says neither party will seek to have it dismissed or removed without the express written consent of the county of Stettler. So originally when these type of easements are done, it's the same property owner as both the grantee and the grantor. So they're still in charge of that. But once we get past that text, when we give our endorsement form called the subdivision authority authorization that goes on to land titles, we can list and put a note for land titles that says, if you get this form and it doesn't have the easement attached, don't register the subdivision. And that's how we keep the package together. And that's how it ends up being registered on title, either directly as an instrument that runs with the land, or if necessary, there's a caveat easement agreement. You know, the most meaningful part is the actual easement agreement itself.
Okay. Board Member Gender?
Just kind of wondering whether that approach should be included onto that acreage, because the amount of access points are going to be much less on that acreage versus say like the rest of the quarter. Just in case there gets to be kind of a dispute, we are limiting the amount of access, say like on that acreage versus over the whole quarter.
If I understand, Mr. Chair, so if it goes really, really bad, you want the acreage to be the one in possession of the access, the existing access.
Yes.
Yeah, so from my perspective, as long as the easements agreement, you don't need that. But if you want to hedge your bet, then a simple condition to say, if there's a motion, Mr. Chair, is to say, adjust the property line on the east to follow the south side of the existing access. And if there's a consensus around the table, we can make those kind of modifications to the approval, so long as we can clearly communicate it.
Okay. Board Member?
I'd be in favor if adjusting that boundary to make sure that the acreage has the access, but even with joint access, but that way it would safeguard it.
Any other questions or comments from the board? I would entertain a mover with that amendment. Go ahead.
I'll move the application be approved with the amendment of the approach boundary plus all the conditions that are in the document.
Okay, any other questions? All right, all in favor? And opposed?
I'm opposed. I think that's something we gotta fix in our subdivision process, but
Okay, that is a valid conversation that has come up a few times, so I understand the need for it. Moving on, we are at 7.3, subdivision 2025-14. Craig, are you taking this?
Sorry. Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So this one, we're about a mile and a bit due west of the hamlet of Red Willow, off 19-0. And the proposal is to create about a 15-acre, a little over 15-acre first parcel out in the very southeast corner. So this applicant had previously obtained approval for a smaller, I think it was down around the 10-acre mark, and didn't go ahead with that subdivision application, and has recently come back with a desire to have more land to be separated for the farmstead compared to the remainder. So the application, if we jump to, before we do that, as a first parcel out, we're not subject to municipal reserve dedication, so we don't have to worry about that as a condition. On Range Road 19-0, we do already have the existing right of way for 30 meters, so we don't have to worry about a road acquisition agreement. We do, at the existing access, still have an issue of sight lines to the north, so there's some need for some brushing in that direction. To the south, we don't have the distance that we usually look at, but it's also a controlled intersection. There's a traffic the control device, a sign, and the north-south direction yields to the east-west traffic. So we're not as concerned about that less than 160 meter sight distance for that purpose. If we go to page 74, we'll find the conditions that we're recommending being attached. And, sorry, my mistake. Did I say 74? Yeah, 71, yeah. So number 3 references the brushing that I mentioned. Number 4 references the need to provide a new access point somewhere along 19-4 for the remainder of the parcel. And unlike our previous application, that section of 19-0 offers several opportunities where you could come relatively level off the road and into the field quite easily. So the applicant would have to make a choice and get the application into the department about exactly where they'd like that access to the remainder to be located. While I'm still on the issue of topography, when you look at, if we could switch back to 74 for a second, please, Andrew. The west parcel boundary pretty much corresponds to a fence line on the top of a ridge on the west side. So this too is another example where the air photo we're looking at doesn't necessarily give us a good sense of the lay of the land. And if we jump down to the photos in the report, or sorry, go up to the photos in the report a little bit more, you can see a little bit more of what I'm referring to. And the second photo is that fence I was mentioning that's running north-south on the west boundary. And then on the right-hand side, dropping down, that goes into the proposed acreage. The Rural Development Fund calculation is to allow the applicant to have access to the full 10%, or sorry, 10 acres for the farmstead. But at 15.3, there's still, or sorry, there's also some wetland calculations that we had to find using an air photo from an older time when it was wetter to locate those. So we've subtracted that from the calculation. And it still leaves around 3.8 acres that would be subject to the Rural Development Fund contribution.
Go ahead. Just a question to Craig. Craig, where the yellow line is on the bottom of our screens, that's a separate corridor between the road and, is that an acreage, or is that part of the other quarter?
I think it's part of the other quarter, and we've got a forest road plan going through.
Go ahead.
If there's no more comments or questions, I'll move that we approve it with conditions stated or set out.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, seeing none, I guess we're prepared to vote on Board Member McKay's motion. All in favor? And carried. On to 8.1, Department Report. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So from July 1st, 2025 to September 30th, 2025, planning staff have processed 34 development permit applications. In the same period in 2024, 20 development permit applications were processed in this third quarter. These permits can be broken down into the following classes of development: commercial, industrial, institutional, and residential. The following figure compares the applications received in each class of development from 2024 and 2025 during that third quarter. So you can see quite a few more residential permits processed in 2025 compared to 24, but everything else is pretty much the same, with the exception of the commercial. We had 2 more applications in 2025 than last year. So the noticeable difference from year to year is the increase in residential permits, as I discussed. Focusing on 2025, residential development represents 79% of all applications received. Commercial represents 9%, and industrial represents 9%, and institutional is 3%. Out of the 33 development permit applications received in 2025, 19 are permitted use permits and 15 are discretionary use. And that is in the third quarter. Scroll ahead to the next page. These numbers can be broken down further for more detailed analysis. The following charts describe exactly what type of development occurred in each class. So you can see with the types of residential, we break it down into ancillary buildings, detached dwellings, clustered farm dwelling, solar array, RV as a dwelling, and manufactured homes. Ancillary buildings definitely take up the lion's share of it, with detached dwellings bringing up the second, which is nice to see. So ancillary building construction leads a type of residential development followed by detached dwellings, solar panels, and then manufactured homes. The interesting trend is the increased number of solar array developments that we're seeing. The figure below details development classes and type received in July 1st to September 30th, 2025.
I do have a question for you on the solar array. Is that the couple of large scale, or is that
No, this is
smaller standalone?
residential only. So this is either 90% of those are roof mounted, with the odd one being like standalone on an array, but for residential use only, not a commercial or industrial.
So the large scale solar projects, what classification would they fit in?
Haven't hit our radar yet because they haven't been taking out a development permit. They have been trying to clear the AUC process. Eventually, they will show up as a development permit.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you asked about the class on the pie chart. Most likely, we would move that into an industrial type class.
So the figure below the table details the development classes and types received in July 1st to September 30th, 2025. So in the industrial class, we had ancillary building, machine shop, and a landfill. In the commercial class, we had a solar array kennel. I'm assuming that must have got put in there incorrectly, the solar array. Institutional was the emergency services, and that was the fire hall that we processed the application for there. Consistent with previous years, the planning department is expecting a slower fourth quarter to end off the year. That's usually indicated every year. And that concludes my report.
Any questions from the board? Go ahead, I'll move the report. All right, all in favor? And carried. Next up, new business. I don't think we have any. Old business, I think we're good. Do we have anything in camera, Mr. Teal?
No, we do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, our next meeting is,
Mr. Chair, I would like to speak to that one if you.
yep,
Undetermined is fair to say, given that we're heading into the election year. The next MPC or organizational meeting will be October 29th, at which point the new council will be looking at the calendar and making some adjustments. If we stick with our regular pattern, our next MPC will land in the middle of the Rural Municipalities Association conference. So we'd have to move it in any case. So the ask from the department as part of the upcoming organizational meeting is to try to fit an MPC meeting in early in the first week of December. We have some applicants who have probably been waiting, and then we'll see if that allows us to stretch it across the rest of December and into, assuming our MPC schedule stays the same, the latter half of January. So we may not need another MPC meeting in December, depending on what kind of applications we have on the table. So that's unfortunately why we cannot specifically pick a date for our next meeting at this point.
okay,
So it'll be a call of the chair that has not been determined at this point.
Indeed, that has to be ratified in the organizational meeting, yes.
all right, well, I guess there's only one last thing to do. Board member,
Last motion is to make a motion to adjourn.
perfect. All in favor?